The dust tasted like copper and old engine grease, and Soli had learned not to breathe too deep when the conveyor belts were running. She crouched at the far end of shaft 7, her small hands working the rock sifter, filling quota because if quota was not filled there was no supper, and if there was no supper there were consequences she had learned not to think about. Around her, 8 other children worked the same way, heads down, hands moving, the particular silence of workers who had forgotten they were children. The shafts of light cutting through the overhead grates were the only way to tell morning from afternoon. Soli had been here for 3 seasons. She had almost stopped counting them. The Tarsan who ran the camp were not cruel the way a weapon is cruel. They were indifferent, the way machinery is indifferent. A machine does not care if the component is tired. The component either performs or is replaced. Soli had understood this by the end of her first week. She had filed it away alongside the knowledge of which overseers watched closely and which ones watched the ceiling, and she had made herself useful and unremarkable and hard to notice. Soli was Vessi, gray-silver skin, wide copper eyes, ears that came to a soft point and folded flat when she was frightened, which was often. Her species were made for high-altitude planes, not mine shafts, and her respiratory membranes had been aching for 2 seasons. She did not mention this to the overseers. The children who mentioned physical problems were sent to the medical tent. None of them had come back from the medical tent. She worked faster. The belt lurched jammed and the entire line shuddered. Overseer Mekin came down the shaft in 3 long strides. He was Tarsan, nearly 2 meters of scaled gray authority, and he did not look at the children when he kicked the belt housing. It restarted. He turned to go. He did not see the second jam. 3 seconds later, Soli saw it. The drive shaft was cracked. She had watched the fracture spread across 3 days and had not said anything because she had no way to be right about something and survive being right about it here. When the belt seized again, it did it violently, and a section of housing panel snapped loose and swung wide. Mekin was not in its path. The child beside Soli was. Soli moved before she understood she was moving. She caught the other child, a boy, Rithian, younger than she was, by the collar and pulled. The panel struck the place he had been standing. Mekin turned, looked at the 2 of them on the ground, looked at the panel, and then looked at Soli the way he looked at malfunctioning equipment. "Get up," he said, "both of you. Quota does not pause." Rithian was shaking. Soli got him on his feet. She kept her hand on his shoulder for a moment, which was all she could do. She was so focused on Rithian that she did not notice the stranger at the shaft entrance, until she heard a voice she had never heard before in this place. "Is this your operation?" The voice was human. Soli had seen humans twice, once at a transit depot when the Tarsan had moved the children by cargo carrier, and once when a human freighter had docked at the camp's loading bay, and the pilot had walked past the children's intake pen without looking at them. She had been told that humans did not involve themselves in Tarsan business arrangements. This one was a woman, somewhere in her 40s, with the kind of weathered steadiness that came from years in places where steadiness was the difference between coming back and not coming back. She wore a patched field jacket, no insignia. She had a survey lanyard around her neck, the kind subcontractors used to access restricted mine zones, and she was standing at the entrance to shaft 7 with her hands loose at her sides, looking at Mekin with an expression that Soli could not read. "Survey team," the woman said, "your station master approved my access at 600. I need to check structural compliance in shafts 6 through 9. She held up a data board. "I have documentation." Mekin stared at her. He stared at the data board. He stared at the children. The woman did not look at the children. She looked only at Mekin, with that expression Soli could not name, steady and level and patient, like someone who has already decided something and is waiting for the other person to catch up. "Survey takes 2 hours, she said. "Your station master will call you if there's a problem with the authorization." He let her in. The woman moved down the shaft slowly, data board raised, scanning the walls. She paused at the cracked belt housing, made a notation. She paused at the ventilation grating above the children's station, tilted her head, made a second notation. She paused at the water dispenser, dry, its reservoir cracked, the same way it had been cracked for 6 weeks. She made a third notation and her jaw tightened briefly before settling back to level. She did not look directly at the children. But when she reached Soli's position at the far end of the shaft, she crouched down to look at the corner joint near the floor, and while she was at Soli's height, while Meccan's back was turned, she set something on the ground beside Soli's foot. Then she stood and moved on. Soli looked down. A water canteen, small enough to hide inside the rock sifter's housing. She looked at the woman's back. The woman did not turn around. For the first time in a very long time, Soli felt something she did not have a word for anymore. She thought, distantly, that the word had once been hope. By the end of the survey shift, Soli had watched the woman cover every shaft from 6 to 9. She had watched her speak to Meccan twice more, once about a ventilation irregularity requiring formal notation, once about a stabilizer reading that needed to be filed with the Territorial Mining Authority within 14 days, or the camp faced a compliance hold. Meccan's expression had moved through annoyance into something more careful. He had stopped looking at the children while the woman was nearby, as though not looking protected him from whatever she was counting. The woman left without looking back. Soli did not sleep that night. The second time she appeared was on the 3rd day. She came with a full survey crew, 2 other humans and a Harathi engineer, carrying equipment in orange cases. The station master himself came down to meet them at the outer gate, smoothing his collar, running the calculations that men like him always ran when authority appeared without warning. Authorization for a full compliance inspection, the woman explained. The Territorial Mining Authority had flagged the ventilation reading from the preliminary survey. Standard procedure. Non-negotiable timeline. The station master's smile did not reach his eyes. He waved them through. She moved the crew through the camp for 4 hours. The station master's expression shifted incrementally from cautious welcome to watchfulness, from watchfulness into something tighter, the look of a man watching a net draw closed around him from below the waterline. He stayed close to the woman with the clipboard. She stayed pleasant and technical, and gave him nothing to push against. On the 2nd hour, Soli heard voices from the direction of the intake pen, not raised, something worse, the flat controlled exchange of people documenting things they had been trained not to react to. On the 3rd hour, 2 of the crew members Soli had not seen before were speaking to the Harathi engineer in low, rapid voices, and the engineer was entering data on a tablet without pausing between entries. Whatever they were finding in the intake records, they were finding a great deal of it. Soli kept working, the belt ran, quota was not suspended for inspections. The woman appeared in shaft 7 once more, alone this time. She crouched at the far end near the corner joint. This time she looked at Soli directly. "You speak standard?" she asked quietly. Soli nodded. "There's going to be a lot of movement in about 30 minutes, the woman said. "Administrative hold on operations. It's going to feel chaotic. I want you to take the children in this shaft and go to the loading bay at the north end of the compound. Don't run. Walk like you're on an errand. There will be someone there with orange cases." Soli looked at her. "What happens after the loading bay?" "There's a transport waiting." "What happens to us on the transport?" The woman met her gaze. She had dark eyes, tired and steady, the same expression Soli had tried to name on the first day. She had a name for it now. It was not patience. It was grief and anger and the decision to do something about both. "You'll be taken to a resettlement facility on Marin Station," the woman said. "It's a good place. You can send word to your families from there if you have them. If you don't, there are people who will help you figure out what comes next." She paused. "Nobody on that transport will ask anything of you. Nobody will require quota." Soli's hands had stopped moving. She made them start again. "How many children in the other shafts?" the woman asked. 41 that I know of, Soli said. "There may be more in the lower levels. We don't go to the lower levels." Something moved across the woman's face, hard and brief. Then it was gone. 41, she said. "All right," she stood. 30 minutes, North Loading Bay, walk, don't run. She turned to go. "What do I call you?" Soli asked. She did not know why she asked it. The woman paused. "Dara," she said. Dara, Soli tried the word. It sat differently than Tarsan names, shorter, less angular. "Why are you doing this?" Dara was quiet for a moment. When she looked back, her expression was the simplest thing Soli had seen from an adult in 3 seasons. "Because you're children," she said. "That's the whole reason. There isn't another one." She walked out of the shaft. 29 minutes later, the administrative hold sirens went off. Soli had prepared. She had told Rithian in the belt pause immediately after Dara left. She had told the others in pairs, during the brief intervals between overseer passes, with her back to the surveillance lens on the far wall. She had not explained why. There was no time for why. She had said North Loading Bay, walk not run, when the sirens start. Some of them looked at her with something between trust and the hollow compliance they wore for the overseers. 2 said they were not going. She did not argue. She told them the bay would be there and they could decide for themselves. They all went. The compound was moving, humans and Harathi enforcement agents, and 2 territorial authority officers who had apparently been waiting in the inspection crews, transport the entire time, because the station master was on his knees on the compound floor with his hands locked behind his neck before Soli had reached the halfway point to the bay. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the loading bay doors and her hand on Rithian's shoulder, and she counted footsteps. And she did not breathe too deep, because the dust still tasted like copper, and she had learned not to. The orange cases were there. One of the survey crew was there, the man who had never introduced himself, and he had the same expression as Dara, the one it had taken Soli 3 days to name. He opened the bay doors without asking them any questions. He counted them as they came through, touching each one briefly on the top of the head, the way you touch something to confirm it is real. The transport was a converted cargo hauler, large bay, clean, with folding seats along the walls and a medical kit already open on the center table. The Harathi engineer was there with children from the other shafts, 23 of them, seated, watching with the particular stillness of children who are not sure yet whether something good is actually happening. It was 44 in total, 3 more than Soli had known about. She found a seat near the bay door and did not let go of Rithian's hand. The door sealed. The hauler lifted. The compound's lights shrank to a pale cluster below them, and then the canyon walls closed over the lights and they disappeared. Dara came through from the forward section 20 minutes into the flight. She moved through the rows without speaking, just looking, eyes, posture, the reading of someone who knows how to find the children who are not all right but are not saying so. She stopped at Soli's row. "You did well," she said. "You came back," Soli said. "I told you I would." Soli considered this. She thought about 3 seasons of people who had said things and then done otherwise. She thought about a water canteen set beside her foot without a word, and a woman who had returned exactly when she said she would, with more people and orange cases, and the specific authority of someone who had spent a long time building exactly the right leverage for exactly this. "You didn't have to," Soli said. Dara looked at her for a long moment. She sat down in the empty seat across from Soli, not standing over her, not crouching with the assessing angle of adults who wanted something. Just sitting, eye level. "No," she said. "I didn't have to." She did not say anything else. She did not need to. Outside the hauler's viewport, the stars moved in their slow arc, and the mining camp was behind them now, getting smaller with every minute, and 44 children sat in the cargo bay eating ration bars from the emergency kit that someone had thought ahead to bring because they had known there would be children, and that the children would be hungry. Soli ate hers. The dust still tasted like copper at the back of her throat. She decided that eventually it wouldn't.